This is the 2021 Jaguar F-Pace, and I'm going to go out on a limb and just say it. I think it's the most beautiful SUV on the road. Even before the facelift, the F-Pace was a really good looking car. I mean, after all, it was designed by Ian Callum and he's not very good at doing ugly. So Jaguar have wisely left the exterior largely alone, just giving it a new front bonnet with some smoother lines. They've slimmed down these front headlights and given them a really cool J-shaped LED driving light at the front here. The front grille has a new design and it's been slightly enlarged, but otherwise it looks largely the same. And it's a similar story at the back. No huge changes, but the tail lights have been slimmed down a little bit and the J-shaped LEDs inside them accentuated a little further. Plus the lower bumper area has been redesigned. This model of the F-Pace is the entry-level P250 R-Dynamic S, meaning that it has a 4-cylinder 2-litre engine that outputs 184 kilowatts of power and 365 Newton meters of torque. 0 to 100 in a comfortable 7.3 seconds, fuel economy 7.8 litres per 100 kilometres. It's mated to an 8-speed gearbox and has all-wheel drive. These stats are roughly comparable with the Audi Q5, although this car has a higher brake towing capacity at 2.4 tonnes versus the Q5's 2 tonnes. The F-Pace has a massive boot. Now, if you go to the Jaguar website and look up the stats, it'll say that the boot holds 793 litres of water, which is good to know should you ever wish to drive your F-Pace into a river. But most of the time, boot space is really only measured from the floor to the bottom of the windowsill. And even if you do that, you still come up with 650 litres, which is a massive amount of room. This is a big boot. Drop the rear seats and you get over 1,000 litres more space. As the outside of the car didn't really need much work, Jaguar have spent a lot of time on the interior. In fact, this is all brand new. You could be in a totally different car and it looks amazing. Up on top of the dash, we've got leather with double stitching and then this beautiful piece of ash that runs the length of the dash. Move down and there's more leather and more double stitching, and it comes right the way back here through the center console to the armrest, all through the doors. There's a wonderful mix of materials. It feels properly premium in here. The new center console screen is 11.4 inches and it's a bit squarer than the widescreen unit it replaces, but most importantly of all, it's got brand new software. It's called Pivi Pro. Bit of a weird name, but it's the same system that you'll find in the latest Land Rover Defender. It's a really simple, cleanly designed system that works really well. The navigation on it, in fact, is actually one of the best native navigation systems I've seen in a car, especially when it comes to searching for destinations. This has always been something that Apple has been better at than car makers, but Jaguar are starting to play catch up there. The images from the 360 degree and reversing cameras are all razor sharp and are actually very helpful when it comes to parking a car as wide as this in tight spaces. I really have to give a tip of the hat to Jaguar for this system because it is a vast improvement on the system it replaces in the previous model, which was pretty awful to use. Now it is beautifully simple and it looks great. It does lose a point though for no wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but to be honest, the system looks so good and so easy to use, I'd rather use it anyway. I love the little sign here, established 1935 Jaguar Coventry. It really gives you a little bit of sense of history of the marque and reminds you that you're in something special. It's a Jaguar. The dual zone climate controls sit just underneath the screen here with haptic touch buttons and some very easy to use dials. We've got the wireless phone charging just underneath that. And then there's this. Now, if there is one thing I miss about the old car, it's the proper gear shifter that it had, especially in the SVR model, and the lower spec models had the rotary dial, but that's all now been replaced by this new gear shifter, which is extremely sensitive to the touch and very easy to knock, and I seem to do it all the time because I keep on getting alerts on the screen telling me that I have to hold the button in to change gears. I just don't like it that much, although it does feel nice with the cricket ball style stitching on top. That's all surrounded by this highly polished piece of metal here, which has got the engine start stop button sunk down into it and pulsates red like a heartbeat until you start the engine. We've also got the volume controls for the sound system here and the drive mode selector dial. Underneath a garage door style lid, we've got a couple of cup holders and another little storage space. Under the center armrest, a nice deep cubby with USB-C and regular USB outlets, plus another 12-volt outlet. This car has been optioned with a technology pack for $3,287, so it scores the wireless phone charging, power retractable mirrors, head-up display on the windshield, and Jaguar's 12-inch digital cockpit screen, which is much the same as the version that you'd find in the pre-facelifted model. It doesn't run quite as smoothly as the cockpit screen in an Audi, but there is a bit of customization there. The colors and the dials change depending on which drive mode you're in, and the maps in between the dials look really good too. The steering wheel is all new and it looks really good, and it goes some of the way to addressing the issue I had with the previous model's wheel, in that a huge collection of buttons has now been replaced by a huge collection of smooth plastic buttons. These seats are also new with high-grain leather. There's 12 ways of electric adjustment, including lumbar support. Heating and cooling is an option, but it's not fitted to this car. Visibility out the front is good, not so great out the sides because of the high sills, and same story with the rear, but there's an array of sensors and cameras on this car to make sure you don't get into trouble. As the boot in the F-Pace is so huge, it does mean that rear legroom has been compromised a little bit. So I'm 190 centimeters tall and I'm behind my own seating position, my knees just touching the seat in front of me. It's not terrible though, I could probably just get by with this. Headroom, yeah, I've got just enough. It is quite dark back here, looking at this dark headliner. I wish this car had a sunroof. There's no rear USBs back here. That is an option that costs a bit more. There is a 12-volt outlet, however. We've got more of this nice fine grain leather on the seats and on the doors, with another nice piece of ash wood here on the door trim. An armrest with a couple of cup holders. So look, all up, it's pretty good, but the Q5's a little bit better. Like all Jags, this car treads the fine line between being refined and exciting performance machine actually really well. It's very smooth and quiet, but there's enough excitement and dynamism on hand for when you want to give yourself a little bit of a thrill. The engine in this car is the smallest in the range. It's a 4-cylinder 2-litre, and compared to the SVR I test drove last year with its supercharged V8, it's extremely tame. But put it into dynamic mode, flick the transmission into sport, and you can still have a decent amount of fun. The torque comes on pretty early at around about 1,500 RPM, and it does kind of run out a little bit as you climb up the rev range, so all the fun is early on. The adaptive cruise control function on the steering wheel is not very easy to use. There's a lot of button mashing that has to go on to get it to work, and you'll figure it out eventually, but it is something that you have to do while the car is moving. You can't practice this when it's stopped because the system doesn't operate then. I could sit down and read the manual, but who has time? And let's see how it goes, bringing us to a full stop here at the lights with the adaptive cruise control on. That was a very smooth stop. I wonder if it'll start again on its own. Let's see. Waiting for these lights to turn green. No. Got to hit the accelerator. The automatic stop-start in this car isn't very good. It's very slow to restart, and there is almost a full second after you put your foot down before the engine restarts and you take off. Now, at the lights, that's just annoying, but at a roundabout where you really need precise timing, that can be a bit of a problem. So I must admit, I do turn it off every time I get in the car. One of the reasons it's so quiet in here are these two speakers that sit up here on the ceiling on top of the driver and the front passenger, and they're sort of like active noise cancellation. They actually block out outside noise and allow a little bit of engine noise to come through, the noises that you want to hear. It actually works pretty well. The Meridian sound system in this car, which is an option at this level, is brilliant. I think it's well worth the extra cost, and the subwoofer makes an awesome noise. There are 4 drive modes available: rain, snow and ice, eco, comfort and dynamic. Not a lot of use for rain, snow and ice on a day like today. Comfort is alright around town. Eco is great on the freeway when you want to save a little bit of fuel. But for me, being an enthusiastic driver, I think dynamic is where it's at. This engine isn't so powerful that it's going to cause any problems, but it gives you just enough kick to get up hills enthusiastically and dart in and out of traffic, so I like dynamic. Another change to the interior that Jaguar made for this model of the F-Pace is getting rid of the window control switches up here on top of the windowsill, which I thought was a really silly place to put them. And they had the seat controls where the window controls normally are, and so every time I went to put the window down, I'd end up moving my seat. They've rectified that in this model, fortunately, and put the window controls where they should be. I love the feeling of all the switchgear in this car. Everything has metal accents on it, and things like the indicator just have such a satisfying sort of click to them when they snap into place, and it all just feels really good. It's something that European cars just seem to do so well. Starting at $84,820 and about 10 grand more for the options seen here, the Jaguar F-Pace, I think, is about the best mid-size SUV on the road. It's fantastic to drive, it looks great, and they're rare enough on the road that they turn heads and spark up conversations with people, because who doesn't love a Jag? So if you're after a European SUV that's a little bit different to the regular Audi, BMW or Mercedes-Benz, then maybe it's time to check out a Jaguar F-Pace.